would say over to you, Morten.
All right, thank you very much, Janus, and thank you everyone for joining. I had some hiccups before starting, so I'd say I'm very happy about American technology right now because that just saved my presence. Let's just put it that way. I was testing out another type of browser that was not happy about. So here we go, a little bit of technology history already being written, but we probably know that part, all of us. Right. This subject of the Danish HCI history has been, it's been a boiling subject in my mind for, or cooking or a bubbling subject in my mind for probably more than 10 years since I finished my studies at Aalborg University in 2010, where I did a PhD on animation and also looked into the history of animation in HCI, so finding out what has movement meant and when was it introduced and why was it used and so forth. So I think that's where part of my interest in this particular subject came from. Also, I believe that it's like a little bit of, you could say, first principles thinking, that if we move back and see what were actually the questions that were asked originally, when in our case, still, I'd say now mature, but yet young and evolving area of work came to be, what were the questions people asked? What were the influences? What were the people? What were the activities and so forth? And in preparation of this talk, or this subject, because I hope we'll turn it into maybe also a little bit of a workshop, then I see that there's actually quite a bit described around what went on in the 1970s, 80s, and so forth. But then it becomes a little bit more of a blurry picture. You can find resources on the history of computing, also in a Danish, Scandinavian setting, but a particular HCI focus or UX focus is actually not very present. So opening up that space or that era of what happened from 1990 and onward, when computing, digital technology exploded into all spheres of life and across all sorts of domains of work, or all domains of work, basically, I think could be or will be a really interesting subject to look into. So I think that's actually the job at hand, and that's where maybe this could turn into a workshop. So what I prepared for today is what you could call a first overview. So like this. So can you see my screen? Yeah. The silence of compliance. Yes.
Yes.
You can see me.
Yes.
Yes. That's super. Thank you very much. So as you can see in the middle of this, there's a timeline, and I really wanted Miro to give me a dynamic line that would move as I added items to it, but I couldn't prompt an AI to give it to me, and I couldn't fathom out how to do it myself. So it looks like this. So we have a timeline that actually starts in around the previous change of century, and all the way up to a present day in 2025. Yeah. And if we go back all the way, and here's a Danish perspective on things, then actually then in 1920. Then we had the insurance company Hafnia. They imported for their 25th year anniversary a Hollerith punch card machine. And that was actually in use for quite some years, these machines. And as you know, punch cards were the kind of predecessor for managing multiple dimensions of data at once. Then at the same time, then in 1920, then IBM, they established themselves in Denmark via a businessman called Max Bodenhoff. And that became a successful collaboration. And one of the anecdotes that I found funny around this, and which is not HCI related, and as such, neither is the Hollerith punch card machines, but it is the beginning of computing in a Danish setting, and most likely also in a Canadian. One of the anecdotes is that just after the war in 1946, then one of the employees in Bodenhoff's company, he drove all the way to Bremen and had been allowed to, or rather the army had allowed the export and thus the import into Denmark of 2 trucks consisting of a whole service setup from IBM, so they could start up their business, which then, as they say, the rest is history. So it actually started in the back of an army truck with IBM in Denmark. Bodenhoff was actually a very good friend, or the other way around. Watson, the founder of IBM, was very happy with the collaboration with Bodenhoff and IBM in Denmark. But that, of course, is a story in its own right. Things are probably happening in the next coming years, but then the next thing that we could say, next point in time that's worth talking about, is that in 1958, and until its probably transformation into something else, then a central and state-driven institute or entity called Regnecentralen, the calculation center, was established. And they made the first Danish-built computer called DASK, which is short for Danish Arithmetic Sequence Calculator. And the DASK machine looked like this. It was a computer as things were back then, big, and you could say a lot of transparency about where the transistors were and how the machine was working. Very much engineering, no problem around that. Then they actually, in the same year, that was in 59, they already started creating a new computer, which was called Geir, which is the what is that in Danish? In English, Geotechnical Institute's electronic calculating machine. And that machine was, you could say, it had the looks of typical Scandinavian design, wood and metal panels, and relatively simple. But what you also see here is that there is some sort of input buttons and more advanced interaction possibilities than what you see on the desk computer. And what happened was that the Danish poet Piet Hein, he had gotten rather frustrated that a mathematician had found out how to solve the ancient game of NIMP, and thus he conceived another version of NIMP and said, and then he approached this institute called Regnecentralen and said, could you maybe use your computer to make an implementation of this NIMPy game of mine? And that was done. So I would actually dare say that this is a first example of human-computer interaction deliberately designed for other purposes than purely data crunching that we see in Denmark, which is this game. I don't know, that statement is purely on my account. And I haven't looked into exactly how the interaction happened, but I think it's interesting that a person of the arts, Piet Hein, came up with an idea for a game, approached the engineering world and said, could you maybe realize this? And then it became the first task of a newly employed Danish mathematician who have then actually written about this. So there you go. At the same time as all of this happened, then something else that's not exactly or immediately related, but it will, I'll show you how. There were some significant exhibitions taking place called Design in Scandinavia. which were showcasing this Scandinavian minimalism, craftsmanship-based furniture, pottery, lamps, etc., everyday objects that had been crafted from principles of affordability, minimalism, connectedness to nature, and basically doing what you could call quality for everyone. Yeah? And that also, these exhibitions established this global recognition of this Scandinavian style. And that took place in this time span of 54 to 57 that these exhibitions were held. Yeah. If we look at what was happening in the rest of the world, then I think most of you are probably aware of and heard of the sketchpad system made by Ivan Sutherland as part of his, or as a result of his PhD work. And what Sutherland did in the States was that he said we can actually, and we should be able to interact with computers in a different way than just as the desk computer did, where you input a result via a punch card or type them, and then you don't see what's actually happening. You can't interfere with or change the process as it goes along. You have to just wait for the result. So it's very much a calculating machine. He said, I'd like to generate a language for how we can talk to and have a dialogue with the computers. So the sketchpad was based on direct manipulation with a dedicated keypad and a light stick that he could then manipulate on a what's it called, CRT screen. And if you see the videos, when I saw it first, my mind was blown because he did all the things you can actually do more or less in a modern day computer. Yeah. So I'd say it's the foundation of computer interaction we have here with all the principles that we know so very well. At the same time, and also inspired by Vannevar Bush, was Douglas Engelbart, who, among other things, and in collaboration with Bill English, who was a lead engineer on his projects, invented the mouse, but also the ideas of the graphical user interface, word processing, hypertext, and video communication. So I'm just mentioning this that you are probably aware of, to put the what was happening in the on the Danish side of things in perspective to what was actually happening, where you could say digital technology was being challenged from a research perspective, whereas down here it's, in this setting, it's more of an application and usage setting, yeah? So more practice versus research, you could say. Anyway, then there were a number of projects that I haven't put on here during the 70s, but in 1975 to 1980, we had in Sweden, we had the so-called DEMOS project, which is short for Democratic Control and Planning in Working Life. And that project was, as it's stated here, and that's a quote from a paper that describes the study, a form of cooperation between the Swedish Center for Working Life and a number of trade unions. And that's worth noting, this part about the trade unions. The project dealt with, as it states, planning, control, and the use of computers from a wage earner perspective. So we are having, again, or not again, but we are focused on the end user, aiming to accumulate knowledge for the union movement. So you could say it was a political agenda, new technology coming into the workplace. How can we shape this new technology in a way that it doesn't undermine our members, the workers' work environment, and empowers them and allow them to still stay in work? Yeah. So it's actually very much a political agenda that controls or motivates this project. The same goes for the Danish Utopia project, that happened from 81 to 85. And if you look at the involved researchers and unions, etc., you will see an overlap of people. Utopia could be translated into training, technology, and product in work quality perspective. So you can see here it's kind of the same agenda as for the Demos project. So as one of the participants, he describes it in a paper about it. He says that while corporations developing technology usually pursue increasing efficiency in production, then Utopia project aimed at other alternative goals, such as translating social values regarding job skills, quality of work, and quality of products into new computer hardware and software for the graphic industries. So if we jump to conclusions, and we have to do that because of time frames, then I wouldn't say that these projects, but I'd say the thinking and all the activities and the trajectories that this laid out in how to approach design of digital technology, which I would say was in the 1970s, 80s, a disruptive technology. How do we approach that in a way that allow end users to still stay in power? How do we approach this in a way that shapes the technology in a way that is useful and approachable by the users? So you get this established what is now known as we don't have a school, but a paradigm, maybe you could call it, the Scandinavian School of Design, which is very much around this participatory design principles, a democratization of the workplace, and then basing it of craftsmanship, skill, and quality, so an emphasis on building as it states existing human competences and the quality of work, as opposed to optimization and efficiency. And then, not least, the Nordic values of equality, transparency, and sustainability. And this is where you can actually see a more or less direct link between the design thinking that is known as Scandinavian minimalism, or whatever you want to call it, and the Scandinavian School of Design. This thing about quality for everything, basing it on craftsmanship, so you could say the central aspect here is actually democratization. Yeah. Right. How are we on time?
We're okay. We still have 7 minutes or so.
All right, super. All right. So then I made some a couple more incisions. So in 85 in Denmark, what was called UniC was created, and UniC was established because at that point computing was distributed across the universities, but it was acknowledged that we needed a central place to have so that we could support using the resources in a proper way, and also pool the knowledge, etc. So UniC was created in 1985, and I actually remember having colleagues. I started my studies in 1990 and finished in the mid-90s when I did my master's, and I remember having colleagues that went to work for UniC. So I'm sure there are people out there that worked on some of the solutions that came out of UniC. So one of them is what's called in Danish skole intra, and everyone that's had kids are gonna have shivers down their spine when they hear about this. So this is a common school system for all schools in Denmark. But who designed that? What were the activities? What were the motivations for making it the way it was? This is where I think it could be interesting to start digging into what actually happened at UniC for this. The same goes for a single sign-on service that was made called Unilogin. I remember using Unilogin at university. I'm not going to comment on it. Then moving a little bit up, we're getting into a discipline that's also getting more and more established with, as we know, design principles. And in March 90, in proceedings of the ICM, Interaction Design, I think it's called, then Rolf Molig and Jakob Nielsen, you probably know this guy, and some of you probably know this guy. But they were actually working hand in hand in the 80s and 90s, in the early 90s, and published quite a few papers around the principles of design. And one of them is this paper, where they had, I would say, they had from, and this is actually really funny, and this is something I spent quite a long time looking for, and I haven't been able to produce it for today, but I've seen it, and I couldn't find it on my laptop. But they made, in 1988, in Computer World Denmark, they had a 2-page piece called The Unofficial Danish Masterships in Dialogue Evaluation. And in these 2 pages in Computer World, as I recollected, so this is being recorded, so as I recollected, they actually, let's just say, they make the hypothesis that these well-known principles for interaction design are the right one. Then in this paper, for communications of the American ACM Center for Computing, American Center for Computing Machinery, ACM, they published, they had made a study and asked people to make an exercise and tell us what are the problems you come up with. And then they looked at the problems that were reported and say they are actually, we can categorize those according to those principles that we set out in that 1988 paper or article or text in Computer World. So this is actually the foundation and the beginning of our very well-known and well-established core principles of interaction design that came out.
We're coming up at the end. I think there is much here to be continued.
There's a bit more to say. What I want to show then is just what I've done here is that I mapped out some services and some technological events. So we are now seeing from the mid-90s, then the start of the World Wide Web, then there starts to be a proliferation of different services and solutions. And what I think would be really interesting to do is to dig into this and find out what is the HCI aspects and considerations that are into creating these solutions. Yeah, that will be my final words.
That's very good. So I think more to be done. Perhaps anybody knows students or others with ample time to continue this project. But thank you very much, Morten. I think, like you said in the opening, this is not only relevant today, but it also shows that there is a gap in our recent history. And I really like this idea of coming back to the questions, like the questions that were asked at the beginning as this industry was formed. I think on your point, Amy, and others in the introduction, like this is an early kind of soft spot for many of us. And then in busy days and lives, we're like, all right, yes, now we're creating interfaces that are based on a conversation because it's AI, but what are we bringing with us so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel? And I think that's hopefully what can come out of efforts like this. I want to recognize that we still have a few minutes, so if anybody has time or has the appetite for questions, comments, reflections, now is the time. Anybody wants to drop in something? I saw our friend from Frankfurt on the chat, Olivia, saying if you want to punch an IBM card, there's a link there to something fun he did on Claude. Anybody else wants to jump in or share anything?
Just to note, there's references on all of this, so it's just not me making it up.
Yes, and I will do my best, perhaps together with you, Morten, to see if we can turn this into a blog post and make this publicly available, and then people can, I think in the spirit of open source, take it in all kinds of different directions so that we can all learn and understand the history better. But back to Frankfurt, Olivia.
Yeah, Morten, thanks a lot. So if I understand correctly, so what you're saying is that we are some kind of blind in regards of our, let's say, usage of computers and how user interfaces came to came to us, right? So is that the quintessence of your
No,
or
not,
what
no,
was
I don't
the?
have any. I don't have criticism.
No, I just wanted,
Yeah.
because what I wanted to reflect actually on is that sometimes we're so consumed in what's happening all around us, and especially in these times, is that we always, we look for certainty, we look for a certain amount of wisdom and knowledge and all of that, and to me at the moment, I feel that we're kind of running and running and running and running towards the answers to our questions, and with every answer we get, the questions are become more like a tree that is spawning to something. So what is your impression on how is there any research on how people actually voiced their experience when I mean, having a truck going from Germany to Denmark with like a punch machine, I think that is not something that happened every day. So somebody must have written
I got that story from a paper on the early history of computing in Denmark, which very much centers around actually the establishment of IBM and what was the market like and so forth. And I just thought, how far back can we go, and and this I thought just a fun anecdote. I mean, fun anecdotes are always nice to see, because that's something you can remember, and then there's the story around it. I think my motivation for doing this, and I'm going to pursue this. I actually have a meeting with Susanne Bødker on Friday. She was a central person in the Utopia project, and I'm going to reach out to some of those other people too. And since you could say the Scandinavian School of Design has actually been so influential, you could say on one side you have the people that were interested in cognitive psychology and look more like at how can we do it the right way based on how does humans perceive the world. Whereas the Scandinavian school takes the social aspect and says, how do we make systems useful by knowing what the users want? Yeah. So you can say there's two big chunks, as I see it, that form UX as we know it today. So making that understanding is one side. Both are important for our area of work, but we also have an area of work that is actually quite mature. So understanding our history is also a way of generating identity for all the practitioners out there. There's so many people doing UX, but where did it come from? Why are we doing this? What were the original questions? What are we standing on? So creating a professional identity by knowing a little bit about our history is, you could say, is actually my agenda.
That's great, Morten. What a great line. Also a great, I think, high to end on in terms of some bigger journey that we're on here. And I want to thank you very much, Morten, for sharing with us. You're very much work in progress. I really like these calls where we can see like the beginning of something. We've done it in the past also with book manuscripts, and similar to good people like you, Tom. Now all of a sudden the book's finished, and I hope we can check in with you, Morten, and that you would share much more from you, because I do think this is important, and I think you nailed it right there at the end. Thank you, everybody, for joining. That's all we had. Thank you also for sharing the fun punch card memory. Olivia, I really appreciate it. I typed in my favorite German football team there right away. Have a great rest of the day, all of you, and hope to talk soon.
Bye.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.